So yes, thank you very much for coming. I really do appreciate it. So today, if there's one thing I want you to get out of the session, it's really to identify sort of one or two areas of your life, and that could be work and home related, that you want to focus on, because we can't change the world in, say, 40 minutes. What I want to do is focus on what we know about the well-being of HR professionals at the moment. There's a lot of work going into this, and there's a lot of people trying to support people like you because of the statistics and the research that's coming out. Okay, so we're going to do a bit of the sort of landscape at the moment and then move on to more practical strategy. Okay. So a little bit about me, for those that don't know. So as Sam gave me a lovely introduction there. So before I went, well, after my undergraduate degree, I actually worked in 3 HR departments because I was dead set that was going to be my career. So I worked in a couple of banks, and then I worked in a not-for-profit charity who provided supported housing in Scotland. And for some reason, I couldn't quite get away from the fact I had to go and study forensic psychology, and that is when my career just shifted. But here we are. I feel like I've come kind of full circle, obviously in the psychology role, but I'm still really interested in work well-being. And my own experience, of even becoming self-employed was actually through sort of work-related stress as well. So to some degree, I can understand when work's tough. Okay, it's just a little bit about me. So you don't have to answer this now. I'm just giving you things to think about. Only I really have time to plant seeds today to get you thinking. So thinking specifically about your role in HR. What pressures do you face? And what do you think is unique to your profession? Like, are there things that you discuss with your colleagues or things that come up all the time? You think, do you think any other professionals have to deal with these kind of problems? Are there these kind of stressors in other professions? So I want you to think more specifically about your role in HR, and you obviously know that best. I can come at it from looking at the research and trying to understand and working with people in HR, but ultimately you're the ones that actually work in it. So, shocking statistic coming out. So what I'm going to say is, this isn't for the doom and gloom. This is factual. This is what's going on just now, and this is why we need to support people like yourselves working in HR. So this was CIPD research in 2023 that said 82% of HR professionals in the UK say their mental health is negatively impacted by their role. Obviously, that's a huge number. So we're going to dig into some further detail about the research as well. You could probably add to this, but we're kind of taking top line at the moment. What is HR stress in context? What is unique about the role? What has changed about the role? And what are you having to face on a daily basis? So firstly, there's the emotional toll. Sometimes supporting others at the expense of yourself and soaking up people's stories. There might be something that somebody tells you one day that really sticks, or it resonates, or it triggers something in you, in a sense, not unlike some of the work I do, and that you might be the first person somebody discloses something to. And that is a lot to take, okay? So we're thinking about just those stories, okay, that you're carrying of other people. The burnout risk from workload, that workload's increasing. The role of HR seems to have expanded from my sort of knowledge and understanding of it. There's the conflict resolution, there's crisis management. Often you're at what I would say is like the sharp end when things are difficult or tricky, but not always, right? And that's the other thing. I think you face that misconception that HR are only involved when things are difficult. Obviously, we know that is not the case. They do a lot of very excellent work in preventing things getting difficult. And then we've got the post-pandemic challenges of hybrid working. Even in the news this week, this debate about working from home. I think it feels quite exhausting. It feels like an ongoing debate. And where do we just, help people to do that individually, and how do we help organisations to be set up well for that, to minimise the stress. And the same goes for you as well. But I think post-pandemic, HR stress has really increased. These are a few metaphors that I was thinking about for HR. They may or they may not resonate with you personally, but it might get you thinking of, well, how do we think about it? Or there might be something you talk about with your colleagues that you think about, what is it like to do this job? So we've got the idea of being the workplace parent, where you're supporting, guiding, and sometimes disciplining others, often putting their needs before your own. Being the conductor of the orchestra, ensuring that every department and individual plays their part in the harmony, even when someone's out of tune. Yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it, yeah, because when something is needing corrected, often you're the ones that are brought in to help to do that. The first responder, always called in during a crisis, expected to stay calm and find solutions while others panic. So it might get you thinking about others. They might not be the ones that resonate with you, but that idea that you are so integral in the organisation and so looked to, especially when things get tough for people. And I think that there's maybe part of that that's underestimated. I don't know if people really have a bird's eye view of what you go through on a daily basis, which is often people's frustration at their work. Other people don't really understand what you have to do. I've been doing a lot of reading, and I'm connecting with people in HR, and just I see a lot of what's on LinkedIn as well. And there's this notion that HR seem to have to cope with, is that there's a general feeling in some organisations that HR will deal with that. Ask HR. They'll do that. If say a manager doesn't know, they'll contact HR, which of course in practice and within reason is okay. But even that notion that you're being lumbered with more than what you should be, and is that okay or is that not okay? So it's just that notion, that feeling that goes around, I think, for some HR professionals. And that's hard to be on the end of that, because when we talk about burnout and things like that, you don't have the resources to match your demand. That's when you start to get all these the consequences of really long-term stress. Okay. So this is the wheel of workplace well-being, okay, which I've presented before. You might have seen it before, but I guess the difference today is you might have watched or learned about this stuff, but it's always thinking about how you can help your employees. Today it's about helping you. But I just want you to think about yourself, and that's why I'm so glad you took the time today to actually prioritise yourself. So this circle, if you think about it, like, so if you start in the middle, and for each segment, the fuller the segment from the middle up. So if it's a 10 out of 10, you would have a full segment, for example. If it was a 5 out of 10, you would be about halfway up. That idea. So I'm just going to read out each segment. I just want you to think about it just now. You can always come back to it. And it's really, I suppose, the better your workplace well-being, the more that you're thriving, the fuller your circle would be. That makes sense. Okay, so these are all linked to workplace well-being through research. So I feel I am treated with respect. I feel cared about. I can speak to my line manager about my mental health. I feel part of the team. I feel I get enough support should be from my manager. There is clear communication from management, and my workload is manageable. They're all really important parts of our workplace well-being. So I just want you to think about, how would you score? Say it was 10 out of 10 for being, maximum, as good as it can be. Where would you score? Because this is no different for people that work in HR. It applies to everybody at every level. So just something for you to think about and maybe to come back to as well. Okay, so how full does your circle look? Okay. So I don't know if you're aware of this. There was a bit of research last year by a company called Ultimate Resilience by two clinical psychologists who are really focused on supporting HR professionals. To their knowledge, there hasn't been any other specific research like this. So it's really important. And they're also collecting data again for 2025. So you'll have a link to their website there if you want to be part of the new study as well. What their main findings are that for HR mental health and well-being, depression is almost 3 times higher than in the general population, okay, affecting around 65% of HR respondents, okay. Half the respondents, almost half, sorry, 46% meet the criteria for clinically significant symptoms of depression, compared with 16% of the general population. They are big numbers, okay. Anxiety is 2.5 times higher than the general population. Symptoms of anxiety are present in 69% of respondents, with 41% meeting the criteria for clinically significant symptoms, compared again with 16% of the general population. So when we were talking about clinically significant symptoms, that really means it starts to impact on your functioning and your mental and your physical health. Okay, that's the sort of the defining point. In terms of burnout, 48% of respondents experience at least one symptom of burnout. Almost half feel emotionally drained from their work. For well-being, low levels of well-being are evident in 57% of respondents. 20% have not felt fresh and rested at all in the past 2 weeks. This one's a big one too, support. Support at work is rated as insufficient by 78% of respondents. So only 22% say they feel well supported in their work. I must say it's hard to kind of deliver these numbers because they're difficult, but I guess we need to ground ourselves in the reality. It doesn't mean you fit all of that, but ground yourself in the reality of how difficult the role can be. And not just how difficult. I'm sure there's good days, there's rewarding days, there's parts of the job that you love, but I guess what we're talking about is what support would maybe be helpful or how you're really feeling. Okay. And there's some more supporting research here as well from wider the States as well. So it's not, so we want to think, not one study is not enough. But there's compelling figures there you can see as well. 60% of HR professionals reporting burnout, 82%, again, that's the figure we started with, that feel that their mental health is negatively impacted by their role, and 67% are actually considering leaving the roles because of the stress. 43% of UK HR professionals report feeling more stressed now than before COVID-19. I don't think that's a surprise. I worked with some organisations during COVID-19, and it was just that sense, like for everybody, when we think back to that time, it was so beyond what we could have imagined. But that really reactive state as well, and people just not knowing what to do, but also maybe HR taking on a wider role then, and that has continued, taking on more tasks to look after people, but you've still got all your other work to do as well. So yeah, I think COVID's made a huge change. Okay, so back to you. Okay, so I know there's a lot on this, but that's kind of the point. So for any of us, when we talk about our mental health, where we're at, there's a lot involved, right? So we need to think about our social and environmental factors, our biological factors, and our psychological factors, okay? This makes up all of us, and we carry this, and it's part of us, it's part of who we are, but it's just having that awareness. And some of these things are static, which means, especially some around the biology or our history, some things can't be changed, but there's so much that can be, and I guess that's our focus for today. But just thinking that every single one of us brings this kind of picture, and of course when we're at work we may show only part of that, but I always encourage people to be able to share those different parts of themselves. I think it's really helpful. Okay. This diagram is from Paul Gilbert, who is one of the leading experts in compassion-focused therapy. And I know it's really simplified, and I'm always wary of taking such sort of complex ideas and simplifying them, but this is his model. But basically, it just talks about us having the 3 emotional regulation systems. The blue you'll see is our drive system. Then we've got our soothing system and our threat system. So drive is our motivation, our doing, our achieving. Soothing, as it says, is when we can relax, we can slow down, just take a minute, maybe, enjoy the little things. And then there's our threat system. There's our nervous system dysregulated, our go survival mode, you're not feeling relaxed at all. So I just want you to have a think, just right now, where you think you are most of the time, like what system you think you operate in a lot of the time, or if you can identify parts of your life or even your day where you think you could see that shift. And obviously what we want here is balance, because they're all important. All those systems are important for our survival. But what we don't want, as you probably have guessed, is to be in the threat system most of the time, because that has so many implications for our physical and our mental health. Similarly, we don't want to be in any of them really all the time, but certainly our drive system is really important and our soothing system is really important as well. So what we're looking for here is balance, but ideally that threat system being proportionately smaller than the others. Okay, but just again, it's something to think about. I just want to plant some seeds today. So thinking about actual stress management tools, and I guess that each of you could probably list out what helps. I guess the difference, because you probably advise other people, you probably read about it, I know you're probably interested in that. But I guess the point today is taking that time to just have a think about what you do and what you don't do and what you'd like to try. So for example, breathing, of course, diaphragmatic breathing is really important to start the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our relax, our rest and digest system, which takes us out of our sort of panic stress mode, okay, our survival mode. So one of those exercises is actually hand breathing. And hand breathing, as you might have seen this, there's square breathing, all different, it just helps to have a visual sometimes. But what we do is when you're breathing in, now you want to do nice deep breaths in through the nose, okay, when you're going up. And we pause, 1, 2, 3, and you go. Okay, and you follow it round where you do your inhale through your nose, you pause, and you exhale on the downturn. And you go round, okay? Now, the most important thing here the breathing and everything, there's so much research about it, but the most important thing I've gleaned from all of the stuff I've seen about it is that it's important that your exhale is longer than your inhale. And actually, when you get used to that, some of you might be very well versed in that, and making a nice whooshing sound on the way out. And a lot of people feel a bit funny or shy about doing it at first, and that is fine. But it's actually a really nice feeling. And if you can do that, stop at times in your day to do that, you're advising. And whenever you're saying to other people, when you think about doing this, I want you to start thinking, am I doing this? Right? Because we need you to be looked after as well. There's also the more CBT aspects of stress management, where you do your sort of reframing. You might have some sort of affirmations that you like to use. You might have some ways of sort of talking back to the negative voice. Some people externalize. So say your anxiety voice, some people might call that like, Annie, there's Annie again. Here we go. Annie, be quiet a sec. I'm just getting on with this, right? So there's lots of different ways, and sometimes they sound a bit silly, but what I know is from all my years of clinical practice is it's just finding what works for you, just to manage in those really tricky moments. There's also a great book by Russ Harris called Action for Happiness, and he has excellent ideas in it for things like if you've got a recurring negative thought, singing it to the tune of Happy Birthday. Yeah, just sort of distorting the thoughts so that it just feels like words rather than taking it on. Okay. Boundaries, one of my favorite topics, probably something that you've thought about or advised other people on. I could talk about this as a whole session in itself, actually. So boundaries, really important for you, is probably more important in your role than a lot of others, actually, because I imagine the amount of emails you get, I don't know about so many phone calls these days, you might still get a lot of phone calls, notifications, how many different systems you're on. That's one thing I've learned about HR. I use a lot of systems, and it can just be really overwhelming. And it's about being really strict. I often advise, I often work with senior leaders, and I advise them to, I know it feels hard not to look at your email for a while, but the world's not going to end. And it's really important to help you focus and get on with other tasks, and actually to retrain ourselves to stop the check-in. I can't remember the statistic about how many times on average we check our phone a day, but it's startling. So I think that, plus your work pressures, being really, really disciplined with yourself about setting times to check emails. Obviously, if there's an emergency, people will have a way of getting in touch, and also making sure that you take some breaks. I am all about the breaks, even if they're short. But when we take breaks, we really send a message to ourselves that we're allowed to rest. I think they are extremely important. And the other thing about yourselves and your position is that there's a lot of opportunities to role model as well. And it's a real opportunity that, well, people in HR are doing this or going a walk or they're out at lunchtime, then maybe it's okay for us. And I think that is also really important. Okay. Okay. This is just a sort of scale, a boundary scale that I produced, and I call it Trust Your Gut. I think this is really important for everybody, that if you're asked to do something at work that you feel goes up that scale, the 3, 4, or 5, you need to listen to that. And it could be for a variety of reasons, whether it's just not in your job role, whether there's a relationship issue with the person that's asking or how they're asking, there's something making you feel a bit unsafe about the situation, whatever that is, I just say listen to your gut. When something feels uncomfortable and beyond, just have a think about it. Please have a think about it, because I'm pretty sure that's what you would say to other people as well. And then once something's crossed that boundary and you feel like it really isn't something you want to do or that you can do, it's about being able to have that conversation as well. And that is all about keeping you safe and protecting yourself and your mental health. Okay. And this is just my equation about no, because I think we are not that good at saying no, just in general. We're often yes people. We're in the sort of working in the caring role as well. So there's one thing, actually, fear of being told no ties into you sort of asking for help, or asking if work can be delegated somewhere, or getting your own resources increased. Often the fear of being told no is then added to feeling unable to say no, and that's when people's workload increases beyond capacity, just because you're maybe used to saying yes. It's hard to say no sometimes, or you genuinely think you'll be able to have time to do it. but that's not the reality, and it can lead to everything on the right hand side here: overwhelm, resentment, low productivity. You become in a cycle because you're not doing everything you thought you'd be able to do, and you don't feel good about it. You feel like you're disappointing people and all of that stuff. So I just want you to think about, are you able to ask for help, and are you able to say no? And I think in your roles, so much has been asked for you that it's inevitable you're going to have to ask for help and say no to some things just to keep yourself healthy and prevent burnout. Okay. Just a little bit about self-compassion at work. Kristen Neff is one of the leading researchers in this area. So if you want to find out more, some lovely exercises on her website, and we can follow up and show you what website that is. So I just want you to think, this is a bit of a classic one, but I just want you to think, what if instead we were to treat ourselves as we would a friend in a similar situation? So say you've got a difficult scenario, say your workload's too high, okay? More likely than not, we'd be kind, understanding, and encouraging. Directing that type of response internally and towards ourselves is known as self-compassion, and it's been the focus of a good deal of research in recent years. Psychologists are discovering that self-compassion is a useful tool for enhancing performance in a variety of settings, from healthy aging to athletics. Okay, and this is a quote from Kristen Neff. I and other researchers have begun focusing on how self-compassion also enhances professional growth. Okay, so it's really important, and I know it's a bit cheesy for some people, but what would you tell a friend? But actually, it's so true. Why would you treat yourself any less than you would treat somebody else? Because at the moment you're caring for so many people, it's probably more important for you to pay attention to self-compassion. Okay. So, as I said at the beginning, I want you to think about, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I want you to think about, say from the workplace wellbeing wheel, if there's any parts of that that particularly stick out, and also from here, when we look at pillars of resilience, okay? Identify just one, at most two areas here, and see what you would like to strengthen. What do you think you need to pay more attention to in your life to build your resilience and well-being? So is it about physical well-being? Is it about your diet, your sleep, your exercise, or seeking, like going to your medical appointments and stuff? Because that sometimes goes by the wayside, and we must go to our screening appointments and everything. So take that into account. Your emotional regulation, how good are you at processing your emotions, paying attention to them, seeing what clues they're giving you. I also want you to think about your social support, both in work and out of work. Your recreation, what do you do for fun? What do you enjoy? What moments in the day, in the week, do you give just for pure pleasure and fun? Okay. Financial, is there financial stress? Is there stuff in your financial world that you want to pay attention to that you keep putting off, that you know you would feel better if you pay attention? Career as well, think about, is this where you want to be? Is there a discussion you want to have to further my development? Paying attention to your spirituality, what's meaningful for you there, what matters to you in terms of spirituality, what resonates with you, is there reading or podcasts or whatever. And then your home and your environment is also really important, isn't it, for feeling safe and for stability. And you think Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that's our most important thing. So I know that's a lot. Please only pick 1, 2 at most, and think that's what I'm going to focus on. Okay. Again, it's just a wellness wheel about all those kind of segments of your life. It's just a visual, and again, you could score that between 1 and 10 and see how full that circle is. So that's like your overall well-being, and the one at the beginning was all about workplace well-being. So it would be interesting to compare your circles as well. Just give yourself a focus of what you've maybe been forgetting about or ignoring because there's so much on, but that leads to the vicious cycle, of course. Okay. This is a wee exercise. I'm going to talk through it If you have a pen and paper just now, brilliant. If you don't, you can come back to it. Okay, so it's just an exercise again to pinpoint what needs focused on. Okay, so I want you to draw a shield, okay, and have 4 quadrants in it. Okay, so you just want to have 4 boxes in your shield. Okay, in the first one is about strengths. So I want you to write 3 to 5 qualities or skills that make you effective in your role. Okay, what does it you bring? And that'd be very personal. And actually, isn't it lovely sometimes to think about our strengths? Because again, that's probably something we don't give much focus to. Okay. In the next one, I want you to list 3 to 5 current pressures or difficulties that you're facing. Okay. Like workload, the emotional toll, if there might be a specific something that's going on that's particularly stressful, whatever that is, whatever springs, I always think with these things, whatever sort of springs to your mind straight away is probably the most important. So I'd say don't try to like overdo it. Just get 3 to 5 in these boxes. Okay. Number 4, values. Identify 3 core values that guide your work. For example, fairness, respect, growth. There are a few, actually, we could maybe follow up with this as well. There are a few values exercises that are really good. And in fact, I just was alerted to one today about workplace values that you can do online. So they could help you with that. And I also want you to write in the 4th quadrant about supports. Okay. 3 to 5 sources of support that you can lean on, whether that's colleagues, whether that's gym class, mindfulness, people. The people in your life are so incredibly important, of course, right? We cannot underestimate your connections, okay? And the idea is, I appreciate you've probably not had time to go through this right now, but the idea is that underneath the shield, write one action you can take this week to protect yourself or build your resilience, okay? So the actions here can be small but really meaningful, and that's the way I work across lots of work I do. I think that's what makes the most difference, okay? And it has to be personal to you. And then just take a moment to appreciate your strengths and values. You know, the reason you do the job that you do as well, getting back to that, say, why did I get into this work? So what do I love about it? And how can I foster that? And then how can I reduce the stresses and the strains? Okay. So just a way of sort of a few more questions to get you thinking. How do I recognize my own emotions? Okay. How do I process my emotions? What do you do? Do you talk? Do you write them down? You know, where do they go? How do I know when I might be struggling with my mental health? What relaxes me? Who can I speak to when I'm struggling? Be that at work, at home, somebody at both places, ideal. And what activities and hobbies fill me up? We talk about activities that actually give us energy. And there's activities that deplete our energy. That's a great exercise in addition, actually. But thinking about what do you need to fuel you, to keep you going? Okay. And I like to think about that having a lifetime membership to the Say Yes to Yourself Club as well, and that you have permission to do that. I know there are things at work that sometimes have to be done and in life, but we also have choices. And sometimes when we say yes to somebody else, we're saying no to ourselves. And I just want you to think about that. And maybe comes back to that sort of boundaries ruler as well. That measure when it just feels out of that. And the thing that always I come back to with the Say Yes to Yourself Club is if somebody asked you to do something tomorrow, there's probably a different answer than if somebody says, do you want to come to this concert with me in 2 months? We're far more likely to say yes because it's in the future. But there's something about really thinking about that. And if there's something like that you're invited to, but you don't really want to go, think if it was tomorrow, would I go? Just something to try. Okay. And you will all know about the Wellness Action Plan, I'm sure. You probably advise other people to do it sometimes. I just wondered, and I put it in here because it's important for everybody. I just wondered if you'd done it for yourself. And I would really encourage you to do that. If you haven't, you might have all done it. But if you haven't done it, I think it's equally as important for HR to do the wellness action plan. Um, you're no different in that you're human and you're facing lots of stressful situations and that you'll need support at times as well. It's inevitable, we all will. I've actually filled it in for myself as well. And I find it really helpful because I go through it with clients quite a lot. Okay. And that's on the Mind website as well, if you're not aware of it. But there's a few ones online, but I usually go to the Mind website. Okay, so thank you. I will just stop sharing my screen now.